guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. My name is Heather. I am a homeschooling mom of 3 kids, and I help you implement systems and strategies in order to overcome the chaos and cultivate simplicity in your home and homeschool. I would love for you to come over and check out my membership community if you are looking for more help and encouragement with homeschool and goals and home management. We have a lot of fun over there. So today I am going to be sharing a TBR with you. And it is going to be all about books that I'm reading this year to help me with my goals, as well as help me with my word of the year. My word of the year this year is simplify. Last year it was slow. And I feel this real pull to some of the things that I used to be doing years and years ago that I kind of stopped doing in 2020, partly because we moved, partly because of COVID. And I'm just now figuring out that some of those habits and rhythms that I used to have really were instrumental in creating happiness in my life. And so I want to get back to a lot of that stuff. And I have a whole list of books to go through with you, so let's get started. So I feel like when I look online and on Instagram, everybody is always wanting to hustle and do so many things, and I really am the complete opposite. I love a slow life. I love seasonal living. I love just slowing down, tech-free, not being on my phone all of the time, and just really simplifying my life. I really love that type of a lifestyle. And going into this year, I realized that I really wanted to pare down things in my life. That's commitments. It's also just stuff in my home. Last year, I did spend a lot of time decluttering and getting rid of a ton of stuff that I had been holding on to. This year, it is similar. I still want to continue going through all of my stuff, but more the emotional stuff, like the memory bins and a lot of the homeschool materials and things that I didn't feel ready to part with last year. I'm feeling much more ready to deal with some of those things this year. So I want to just simplify my life. I don't want to be focusing on managing all of the things and really focus on relationships with my family and my community. That is the most important thing for me. And so I'm hoping that some of these books will be encouraging. I do have a whole list here. I've written out some thoughts. So if I'm looking down, that is what I'm doing. The question that I'm trying to answer is, how do we shift our mindset to a slower, more intentional life? And I've been talking about intentional living a lot over the past year in my membership community, and making sure that you are doing your most important things and really ranking all of the tasks that you have. Why are you doing this task, and what is the outcome that you want? Is this something that has to continue being done day after day, or is it something that you can let go? It's just been an interesting experience for me to kind of consider a lot of this stuff as I went through my prep work with my power sheets this year and talking with my members. It's been a lot of fun. Okay. That was a really long introduction, guys. So the first book that I have is The Joy of Missing Out by Tanya Dalton. And I think that this book came out in 2019. It's about identifying what's important to you and clarifying your priorities, developing ways to streamline your specific workflow, and discovering your purpose. So I wrote about the fear of missing out and how I try not to have that FOMO that a lot of people have when you look on social media, or you see people going on vacations, or you see what others are doing in homeschooling or in their businesses or whatnot. And so I thought that this sounded like a really interesting book, The Joy of Missing Out. It is something that I have seen written about before online. I read a lot of blogs, and I have for years. And I think that Tish Oxenrider she used to write a blog called Simple Mom. I believe that she wrote about the joy of missing out years ago. And I really liked that idea that I'm choosing what I don't want to do, and instead leaning into the things that are most important to me instead of what others are telling me are most important. So I'm really excited about that book. The next book is called Care by Brooke McAllery, and she is an Australian podcaster that I've listened to. I'm not sure if she's still doing her podcast. And this book actually came out, I think that it came out in 2020, but it was not released in the US until more recently. I'm not sure if I can find it yet. I was looking for a copy at the library and I don't think they have one. So I'm going to have to dig a little bit deeper for that. But what this book is about is exploring what it means to care in small, powerful ways for ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities. And she wrote a book called Slow that I read, I think it may have been 2018, which explored slow living and how to lean into slow living. And again, choosing the most important things and really doing those things regardless of what others are saying or what you think is the right thing to be doing, quote unquote, right by society standards. And so I knew that when she was coming out with this book, Care, that I really wanted to read it. And it's now available. So I'm going to read that. And then I am planning to reread Slow. Because I did enjoy that. Typically when I reread books, I will just preface this because I do have several rereads on here. I will listen to those books on audio because I've already read the book and taken notes. I love to take notes about books and quotes and things like that to kind of help me get the most out of the book. But then when I am rereading a book that's nonfiction, personal development type book, I like to listen to it, and it just gives me a boost of motivation. And I usually will hear a couple of different things that maybe obviously I read the first time around, but they just kind of stick out to me more now, and I will take different notes, but I will listen to my rereads mostly. A lot of these are available on Hoopla, which is what my library has as like a digital subscription. It's not a subscription, but a digital version of the library where I can check out ebooks or audiobooks and movies and music, although I don't use it for that. But I know that Slow is on there for me. The next book that I have is The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. It says, easily letting go of things that you don't need, decluttering now so your family doesn't have to later. And I think that I've seen this book several times. I read Marie Kondo's book on decluttering. I've read all kinds of decluttering books over the years, and I do really enjoy them. I am not a minimalist at all. I have so many books that I will not get rid of because I read and reread them over and over again. We're literature-based homeschoolers. I do a lot of paper planning and journaling, so I have a lot of paper in my home. And I also definitely have this feeling of I need to make sure that I keep X just in case Y happens down the line. I'm trying to get out of some of that, but I definitely have that mentality where if I get rid of something, I'm going to need it pretty much as soon as I get rid of it, and then I have to spend money that I don't necessarily want to spend on that item that I already owned. So considering what I have and how much I use it, how much I actually need it, is one of those things that I'm going to be doing this year. I'm actually really good at throwing away junk, but what has happened over the years, I've gone through several stages of decluttering my house, and I have ruthlessly decluttered. I did that right before Lucy was born, back in 2014. I think it was 2013. I went through this whole thing where I got rid of so much stuff, and I regret getting rid of some of those things now. Things like old letters that I used to write to my friends and that my friends wrote to me, and some old memory keeping stuff that I just didn't want anymore at that point, but I wish that I still had now. So it's really hard for me to kind of go through and understand whether or not I'm going to want it in the future. So I think that this will be an interesting book to read. I love anything about people that ruthlessly declutter their homes. I think that they're a lot of fun. The next book that I have is Making Home by Sharon Astick. And this book I actually own. And this is a reread for me as well. This came out in 2012. She used to have a website that I would read all of the time, centered on farming and like urban farming, urban homesteading, and reducing your impact and reducing your energy usage. But I read this book way back in the days where I was making all of my own personal care products. I was doing a lot of canning and gardening and making home, but this is about making do with what you have instead of buying a bunch of new stuff to create a lifestyle. It's really looking around at what you have, which is interesting, and that's probably why I have a challenge with the decluttering books, because I also really feel connected to these types of books where you're doing as much as you can with what you have, but if you get rid of everything, you don't have those things to make do with anymore. Do you need them? And it's kind of just like, do I need those things, or can I get rid of those things? Is it really necessary for me to have X, Y, and Z, or is it not necessary? So I think that reading this book again is going to be helpful with my decluttering and understanding whether or not some of the things that I've kept are needed or not. So I'm really looking forward to this one. The next book that I have on my list is called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, and he wrote Digital Minimalism and Deep Work, two books that I really, really love. I saw this book. It comes out on March 5th, and the title really grabbed me, and so I'm really looking forward to reading this. I don't know a lot about it, but just slow productivity sounds right up my alley, and so I'm looking forward to that one. The next two are also rereads for me. So I do have a lot of rereads on here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I have 5 on here. So the next two are both rereads. The One Thing by Gary Keller, and this is learning to focus on what matters most in your personal and professional lives. This book came out in 2013, and I have read it and reread it so many times over the past 10 years. I think it's very, very valuable information, figuring out what your most important thing is and taking the time to do that thing and not getting cluttered with all of the other things that happen. And that is something that is very easy to fall into that trap, to just have all of these things coming at you, especially as a parent, especially as a homeschool parent. It can be a little overwhelming because you don't feel like you have the time to focus on one particular task. You feel like you have to multitask your way through the day, and that is really an inefficient use of your time. I've talked a lot about that when I talk about time blocking and just setting up your days. So it's a quick read, and I definitely recommend it. I love this book, and I read it pretty much every year. The next one that is a reread is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And again, very similar, determining what your most important thing is, what is essential, leaving the rest. One of the things that it says on Amazon, if you go on Amazon, it says, by forcing us to apply more selective criteria for what is essential, the disciplined pursuit of less empowers us to reclaim control of our own choices about where to spend our precious time and energy, instead of giving others the implicit permission to choose for us. And so it's one of those books that is really motivational and helps you stay on the path that you want to be on. I think that's really important. The next book is by John Acuff, All It Takes Is a Goal. I heard Lakin from Plan with Lakin talk about this book briefly last fall maybe, and I love any goal setting book, and I was in my goal setting time period at that point in the year, and so I really want to read this book. He has written some other books that I love, Start, Finish, and then Soundtracks. And for Christmas I got my oldest, Emma, Your New Playlist, I think that's what it's called, and she absolutely loved that. If you have a teen and you want to get them a personal development book about mindset, positive mindset, making choices, all of that kind of stuff, I definitely recommend that. So I'm really interested to see what he says about goal setting. That is the next book on my TBR. I know this is really a long TBR, guys, and I do read a lot. I don't watch TV. I don't really watch movies. I do a lot of audiobooks, especially for nonfiction, because I can knit at the same time or do puzzles or clean. and I just always have my book journal at the ready to write notes if it comes up. The next book that I have is Life in Five Senses by Gretchen Rubin. The little blurb that I pulled: in this journey of self-experimentation, Rubin explores the mysteries and joys of the five senses as a path to a happier, more mindful life. I really loved her book, The Happiness Project, which came out I think like 10 or 11 years ago. I loved that book when I read it. It was very helpful for me in 2013 to read that book. And then the other book that I've read of hers that I also really love is The Four Tendencies. I love personality assessments, and in The Four Tendencies, I am a rebel, which may or may not surprise you. I like to go against the grain. I like to make different choices. I don't like to be told what to do. So I really enjoy that book as well. If you're interested in personality stuff, leave me a comment. I would love to chat about it. The next book that I have is Year with No Sugar, and technically this is not really related to my goals. I mean, it kind of is goal adjacent because food prep is one of the things that I'm planning to work on with my kids this year. But the reason that I have this on my TBR is I read two of her other books, which were A Year with No Garbage and I think Year with No Clutter was the other one. And those two books actually came out after this one. This was the first book that she wrote with this challenge. I love challenge type books, The 100-Mile Diet, Animal Vegetable Miracle, all of those types of books where you or like a no buy year, all of those types of things I love. I've never done anything like that. I would love to do something like that sometime, but it just hasn't been a priority for me, but I love to hear others' stories about it. So I'm interested to see how this project went for her. The next book is another reread, and it is called The Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch. I have talked a lot about our screen-free days in our homeschool, trying to really observe a Sabbath day on the weekends. I like what he says about one day a week, one weekend a month, and 1 week a year where you're completely off technology. And that is really appealing to me. I have been pretty successful about the 1 day a week. I have not been at all successful with 1 weekend a month or 1 week a year. I did toy a little bit with it this past summer. I did take a big break from social media. I run a large Facebook group for Maine homeschoolers, and I put that on pause for a week or 2 weeks a couple of times this past year, and I loved that, just stepping away from social media. I don't feel like I use social media all that much, except for these commitments that I already have, my work and this Facebook group, Maine Homeschool Network, that I run, just because I didn't have community when I started homeschooling in Maine like 13 years ago. And so I like to be able to connect with others and share ideas, but it's a lot of work to manage that group. So I want to reread The Tech-Wise Family. This came out in 2017, but it is something that I tend to read every couple of years. And I do want to pay more attention this time to how he implements the 1 weekend a month and 1 week a year projects or of these tech-free time. His daughter also wrote a book called My Tech-Wise Life, and I own that book. It's down on my shelves, but I can't grab it at the moment. I would like to read that with Emma and Jack, potentially Lucy if she will sit and listen to it. I think it would be helpful for them. It's her experience growing up this way without technology. They didn't have phones until I think high school. They did not get social media. My kids, Emma is the only one that has a phone. They do not have social media. I know it's very, very strange, and it's actually really difficult to communicate and manage activities without social media. That seems to be the only way people can connect, unfortunately. So it'll be interesting to read. And I have read both My Tech-Wise Life and Tech-Wise Family. The next book is another reread. It is called Chasing Slow by Erin Lochner. And I heard her on a podcast with Brooke McAlary years and years ago. I think her book maybe came out in 2017, and I read it in 2017 after her little press tour, and I listened to that podcast. Really interesting. Again, just making choices that are outside the norm and how those choices actually impacted your life. The little blurb that I pulled is, in chasing slow, Erin upgrades her life through downsizing her stuff, her obligations, her fears, her personal metric of perfect, and ultimately her invitation becomes yours to turn away from the fast and frenzy and find freedom and a new fashioned lifestyle defined by grace. I do find some of these simple living books a little more challenging to read as a parent of 3 kids, as a homeschooling parent, because like with the decluttering stuff, because there are some things that we need that maybe other families don't need, and being okay with those differences is something that sometimes is difficult to work through if you're reading a book and you think, oh, but I have all of this, and still being okay with that and taking the little nuggets of important information from the book for your specific life, I think is important. So this is another one that I own and will be rereading. The next book that I have is The Joy of Less by Francine J. Having less stuff is the key to happiness. This book came out in 2010. I own it, but I have never read it. So I'm really interested in what she has to say about a simple, more streamlined and serene life. I'm not a minimalist. I've already said that. So we will see. Those are all of the books that I have on that list, but I do have a couple of others that I own that again are rereads, but are going to be instrumental in my goal setting this year. The first is Rhythms of Renewal, and I have talked about this quite a bit recently. If you saw any of my goals videos, like my 2024 goals or my quarterly goals or my January goals, I did talk about Rhythms of Renewal. I'm going to be using this as a guide for my Rhythms of Renewal goal, creating a rhythm of renewal, all about rest, all about, again, choosing what's important, really understanding what I want out of life, the things that fulfill me, the things that recharge me. It's really, really interesting. I will leave some links for some of the content that I've done around this already. I am going through this with my membership community. Most of them are reading it at this point in time. So if you're interested in that, again, you can come check out my membership community. The next several books are the Life Giving series by Sally Clarkson. I'm mainly focusing on the Life Giving Home, which is funny because I do not own that in physical form. But I do own the Life Giving Parent, which I love, and the Life Giving Table. I'm also going to be working through this Life Giving Home experience. Again, in my membership community, there's a challenge for each month and just some questions and things to go through. I had purchased this at the beginning of 2020 to do in, I think I may have bought it in 2019 to do in 2020, and that obviously did not happen. I do implement a lot of her practices already and find them very valuable and encouraging. She has written so many books about parenting and homeschooling. I have not had success reading the majority of her books until I got to this Life Giving series. So if you have read or tried to read Sally Clarkson's books in the past and you have not identified with them or had struggled to move through them, I definitely recommend this series. So I'm really excited to explore these concepts more deeply this year. And then the last book that I have is another reread. I got this maybe a couple of years ago, Simply Living Well, a guide to creating a natural low waste home. There's a lot of recipes in here about food and cleaning supplies, just natural living, zero waste bathroom swaps, all kinds of different fun things that I want to do with my kids this year. So we'll be working through this book together, probably on our Friday screen-free day. I'm also hoping to do a little bit more with cooking, which I talked about. So I might have some cookbooks coming up soon to share with you as well. But those are all of my TBR books, nonfiction type books for my goals this year. I know it seems like a lot, and you don't have to read nearly as many books as I do to move forward, but I would encourage you to maybe choose a couple of books to read this year that would be supportive of your goals that you have or encourage you with your goals or goal setting in general. I will leave links for all of this stuff in the description box. I know there's a ton, but I really wanted to share them with you. One of my goals really is to be working more off of a TBR this year. So instead of just hearing, oh, that sounds like a good book, and then just reading it immediately or forgetting about it, I'm having this TBR so that I can move through some of these books when I have some time and I don't have another book going. I want to be pulling from a TBR because there are so many books that I want to read, and I'm a mood reader, so I don't tend to read off of a TBR, so I'm hoping to change that a little bit this year. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you have a TBR or you're on Goodreads or Storygraph, I just joined Storygraph, although I'm not entirely sure I like it at this point. Leave me a comment and let me know what you're reading. Yeah, so thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.